should be a fun session. I'm here with Ernie Ostick from Manta. We're going to be talking about the concept of data lineage and kind of how it's evolved over time and what it can do for businesses around data transparency and observability. Before we dive into this, what is considered like actually a very hot topic right now, just want to introduce myself. My name is James Nanscorn. I head up the data governance practice over at Data Meaning. And Data Meaning is a full service data consultancy where we look at sort of really every step of the data journey and the data ecosystem. We help companies big or small with data strategies that relates to the last mile of the journey around analytics or around data governance. So that is Data Meaning. I'll hand over to Ernie just to provide an introduction around himself.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it. Ernie Ostick here, SVP of products over at Manta Software. And at Manta, we're one of Data Meaning's partners, and we work all closely together. So James and I have been working together for a while here on Lineage. But at Manta, as we're going to talk about today, we're passionate about this discipline of data lineage. And I've been doing data lineage for a long time more than I probably want to admit. But been at Manta now for 2.5 years, and prior to that, spent the better part of the previous 2 decades with IBM as part of the integration team there, and worried about metadata management, governance, but especially the flow of data as it goes through people's enterprises.
Thanks, Ernie. So, look, just keeping this high level, and Ernie and I are going to get into just sort of more of a frank, open conversation around data lineage, just to really sort of define or frame the definition here. Data lineage tracks the changes, the record of changes, and then the transformations of data as it makes its way through the data pipeline. And there are a whole multitude of analogies that you could put to this, but ultimately, the evolution of data lineage has been sort of largely through the growth of the use of and the need to acquire and consume data over time in essentially just about every industry that requires data in order to grow and compete. And we've really sort of gone through these step changes over time in terms of the way that data is both acquired and used. And we're now getting to this age where data is an asset that will make or break any company. And it's something that is utilized more and more. It's becoming such a valuable asset that there is a need to really understand, what what that data is doing at any point in the journey from provenance, from your raw data sources all the way flowing downstream to your consuming applications. And once upon a time, the data would start in maybe just a small handful of your raw data sources, like an ERP system, for example, and then maybe go through some simple transformations, and then come out the other end in the form of a report or a dashboard to inform either a central IT group or some executives. It's changed a lot. And this is something that we'll dig into, but that landscape has changed so significantly to assist with the sort of evolution of the need for and the value put behind data to the point now where it's difficult, even working in the data space, to recognize the data landscape now versus where it used to be, and that the modern data stack really then supports and facilitates transparency around data across a number of important concepts, beyond just ETL. We're around, this idea of data observability, the idea of data quality, and the idea of being able to trust your data. So yeah, simplest form, it's tracking the data lineage through those changes and transformations. It's helping you understand where it's coming from, where it's going to, and then ultimately, the transformations, what's changing, what's happening to that data as it goes from its original state into its final state.
You made some good points about how this is evolving. I think the most interesting thing from my perspective is that we've been talking about data lineage for over 20 years. And the basic premise of lineage is the same, right? As we've said, where it's coming from, where it's going to, and what happens to it along the way. But the landscape has changed so much, not only in terms of the different systems that people are bringing into play. And we've always had things like mainframes and source systems that are of legacy nature that are pulling things. But now we keep adding more things to the other side, right? When we go back 10 years ago, people weren't talking about hybrid cloud scenarios. And now we're looking at lineage that has to go indeed from still those legacy systems for many companies. But now not just pumping into a data warehouse or a data mart or reporting system or Hadoop, and now it's sitting up in the cloud. And then for some organizations, and some of you that are listening here, it may have only started in the cloud, maybe a brand new endeavor. The data originates in the cloud. It then moves around from place to place. Maybe it's in a database that's up in the cloud somewhere, and then being reported on by reporting tools that are in the cloud. So, whether you're looking at an on-premises scenario where everything is still behind your firewall, if you have a mixture of things, both behind the firewall and pushing things up into places such as Amazon or Azure, and then out into reporting systems or exclusively in the cloud, the problem is the same, but the technology landscape has changed so much. When we start defining lineage, and James and I all go into this, it then starts to look and say, okay, now that I've got that in place, what are the reasons, right, that I'm doing lineage? And those have evolved over the last 20 years as well. So technologies, the reasons, and then what we do with lineage and how we examine it. It's not just a pretty picture anymore, is another aspect that we're going to want to talk about.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And look, I think not that many years ago, the concept of metadata and metadata management was really, again, to largely serve an IT team or a central group of perhaps data engineers or DBAs to understand either the structure of a specific data source or just to really get clarity around the data as it persists in that system. Sort of really more kind of these spot solutions. And now we're getting to the point where that metadata is then providing that level of information around the data that can then, serve your views into how that data is changing as it moves through these pipelines. And it's really, the needs have evolved, but then also the technology has evolved to the point where we can do this in a much more efficient and a much more automated fashion. So then what we get are more of these modern data landscapes, right? So these new data ecosystems that are looking at a whole variety of capabilities that have the capacity to not just ingest now largely unstructured data, but then as we're looking on the other end around more than just, obviously reports and dashboards, as we're thinking about AI and ML, the ability to start, predicting or forecasting and predicting what's going to happen around, perhaps our customers, changes over time in terms of usage of our products, etc. And the models associated with that, throws into questions things like, are we trusting the insights that are delivered by those consuming applications? Are we blindly trusting that information? And so there's this evolution, not just in terms of analytics and BI. Obviously, business intelligence has been around for decades now, but something that has evolved as well, particularly in the business landscape, is the idea of self-service analytics, and the concern that self-service analytics really lends to the Wild West, and the potential for like missing decentralized oversight, or just ultimately an inability to understand every last person who has access now to a specific platform that can find and manipulate data and then output to some accessible platform for all individuals to then start drawing insight and perhaps acting on those. So there's real concern. I think a lot of companies are now waking up to the fact that there was this first initial push around self-service, which was, hey, let's empower our business front lines. Let's cut out the middleman. Let's make sure that our business subject matter experts around a specific domain, let's say finance, let's give them the tools and the knowledge and then the access to the data. But of course, these tools are intuitive. They're not code-based. They're not like they were 20 to 30 years ago. But these tools enable any sort of business person, non-technical, to produce these types of insights. Fantastic, great for companies that are looking to be much more data-driven, following the footsteps of an Amazon or a Netflix, but a nightmare, for your central governance, or for sort of ultimately compliance purposes, and for really understanding where there might be quality issues or changes coming along the way, for being able to track that properly, because ultimately, these companies have been so successful, and these self-service platforms have been so successful with ultimately scaling the use and the production of analytic insights.
There's certainly no question that people are having over reliance on data that they blindly trust, right? So governance comes into play, and I usually like to talk about governance as having like a three-legged stool. Understanding the data that you've got, being confident in its quality, but also lineage, right? And where did it come from? And that's a huge piece of the confidence factor. You mentioned compliance and regulation on here, and that has been a massive business driver, especially in the last 10 years. The largest banks, thanks to the debacles that happened in 2008, 2009, needed to respond to the Basel II requirements that came out. BCBS 239 is probably known to many of our banking listeners, but there's other compliance initiatives throughout the world that relate to finance. And a lot of it, if you read through it, it's not a standard in the same way that we think of XML or something as a standard. It's more a guideline that says, you need to be able to demonstrate, a banking organization, that you can say that these particular sources of the data that are leading to your risk calculations or your risk strategies for your commercial loans or other aspects of the business, that those particular sources are ones that are controlled. Well, first of all, you got to find them, right? And so illustrate to the government or to the regulating bodies that where the data actually came from when it flowed into your spreadsheets or your risk engine. But then be able to also then prove that, in fact, there's other aspects of governance there. So as a part of doing the governance and being able to decide where we need to have stewardships established, or where we need to be able to put in quality controls and rules, finding those things, and then later being able to ascertain that this report actually comes from certified sources becomes important. The second area that has been huge in the last few years, of course, is data privacy. And being able to connect the dots becomes a massive driver here. If I know that I've got sensitive data that's sitting in a Oracle database sitting in San Francisco, and I've discovered either with tools or on my own that I have the similar sensitive data sitting over in London in a Microsoft SQL Server system, how did it get there? How did it flow from one to the other? What are the other possible leaks and holes that I might have as it's flowing from San Francisco? If it's sensitive, maybe there's other places I don't realize that it's going to, and Lineage can help expose that. Maybe you're dropping it in an audit file along the way in, Tampa, Florida somewhere. And I'm using geographical areas, but, it could be anywhere within your enterprise. But being able to identify those things becomes critical, because those are possible holes or places that you want to be sure that you've got the same controls in place. Privacy rules not only tell you need to know where it lives, but also what do you need to do if someone wants to be removed from your system. You need to know all the possible locations. But those are potential risk areas that people concerned about GDPR care about. James, you're seeing migrations as well. What have you seen in that area?
Pretty significant number of migrations, like most commonly in current times is really the movement of or migration of data from legacy systems out to cloud, and the commitment by most companies now to move to the cloud has created these pretty significant sort of transformational type projects, definitely very strategic or a strategic imperative for the company. In those particular cases, there's essentially this spring cleaning that has to happen among all those legacy sources, just to really understand first the inventory of your sources, then more granularly understand the data that persists within those sources, so you can really define and document definitively what data you intend to migrate to the cloud, i.e. what are your key data elements, what's strategic versus what should you leave behind. And there's a lot of cases this is airing dirty laundry. This is really eye-opening for enterprises, as they go down that journey. And of course, it sort of benefits in many ways, right? So this is not just for the sole purpose of getting your data to the cloud, but it's also an opportunity for you to really start to cleanse, consolidate, and you sort of get some clarity around what is needed and what is not.
I like what you said earlier about spring cleaning. One of my favorite analogies in the migrations from a former colleague of mine that talked about every time each of us move from a new apartment to a new house to another house, there's always what he referred to as the inert box. And that's the box that you taped up the first time you moved from your first apartment to the first house, and it's taped up and you don't have time to look at it, and it moves from room to room in your next house, and eventually it goes up to the attic, and you don't have time to open it, because if you do, you're going to have to go through every little detail of what's inside that box. And so you move again, and guess what happens? The taped box moves again to the next place. It keeps on doing that because you just don't have the time and resources to go through it. And legacy applications that I now want to move and get the benefits of putting into, Snowflake or other invested databases and application platforms in the cloud. Do I want to move everything? I mean, my subject matter experts for that application I built 15 years ago may not be with the company anymore. It's possible that we purchased a analytics model that had, 4,700 tables and views and stored procedures and things in it that many people would need in my vertical. But yet now at this point, did we ever implement all of them? So we may have objects out there that aren't even touched and never were loaded. Or we may have reports that are no longer being used because they were supplanted by other things. And so out of 174, analytics tools that we used to run against that particular system, maybe now we're only using 24 of them. And we don't have inventory. So Lineage can help with that inventory. So I can identify which things are my inert boxes and then more quickly migrate to this new cloud investment because I can identify what I really need and eliminate the things that I don't. And there's no point in doing a complete lift and shift of 4,500 different objects if I don't have to. The other piece of this that's clear in the picture is not only do people want to get the ROI faster for their cloud investment, but they also want to retire those applications, right? Decommission them because they cost money, right? There may be resources, machines, licensing, all kinds of things that would help them if they can accelerate that process. So Lineage and understanding that legacy system helps with both, as well as the ability to be able to see that, this particular report has this particular lineage path. Let me look at it on the legacy system. Let me look at the lineage on the new cloud environment and make sure that the lineage is similar before I throw away this other environment.
The analogy you used for around the inert box is great. I think I might have to use that one, Ernie. So yeah, that's it reminds me of like a TLC reality show. I think it was one that it's like a while back where they have people who are looking to organize their house and perhaps have never done that, and they have these organization specialists who come in and kind of explain concepts of organization. But I mean, the simplest form is put your pile of stuff in one place so that you can see it, and then you make a decision: keep it or throw it out. Simple as that. So you take your pile of stuff and then you just divide it. It's like the stuff you're going to throw away and the stuff that you're going to keep. Same kind of concepts, right? It's like, ultimately your metadata, using platforms like Manta, platforms like, data catalogs to shine a light on your stuff, on all, like that full inventory of your data sources, as well as the data that resides within it. And something like Manta is invaluable for essentially shining a light. So that inert box that you keep moving from place to place, suddenly that's not a black box anymore. Suddenly there is some transparency into exactly what is contained within that box, so you can then make a quick decision. Actually, I kind of feel like there should be some automated software for you to get all the information around the stuff around your house. That would be kind of handy. So I know, sort of where something is and when I need to throw it away when I don't need it anymore. The other thing that you mentioned, and it was around compliance and regulation. Back in the day, it was always you pulled together some reports for audit purposes, but they were, again, really specific to a system, a technology, a platform, where data might be contained, and then where there needs to be some focus around that specific data, what form it's in, and sort of what privacy or sensitivity issues there may be associated with that data. But again, sort of focused on that system. Now, with the advent of GDPR and others, there is sort of any number of compliance laws around things like need to know and the right to be forgotten, where ultimately any individual can knock on the door of any company and essentially say, hey, I know my data lives within your company. I need you to remove it, or at least mask it or hide it. And I can't even imagine just how that world must have been sort of prior to automated data lineage, to essentially sort of come back definitively to say, hey, not only did we target every single, system or every single part of every data pipeline to know, where your data lives, but we can confidently say that we've removed it, and then here are a bunch of reports to demonstrate that. So that's that is an area in our world that I think is going to evolve and grow again, sort of further, with more significance. I think it's as compliance and regulations continue to grow, either expand within so these regulatory bases that exist today, or as new regulations come out. So that's that's kind of covers the main business drivers. The last ones we didn't really sort of touch on too much, but I think it's going to be a big driver, as well as the concept of data ops and observability across data pipelines, and understanding change impact associated with changes in data.
I'll go back to data ops for just 1 second, right? I mean, the key there is maintaining the robustness of that analytics data pipeline. And that means making sure that it keeps running, because inevitably things happen. The longer and your analytics pipeline is, and the more technology is involved in it, there's too many odds where something could potentially go wrong. It happens. And so being able to do problem resolution or root cause analysis is important for your data ops teams, the ones who are actually supporting those reports. When someone wakes up on Monday morning and the report isn't there, or it's getting 0 records, why? What happened? Inevitably it could be a data issue or a machine issue. There's lots of things that could happen. It might come down to the roots of the fact that there was a date that caused the lookup table to not get loaded because of some null values. And of course, that messed everything up downstream. And then the reverse is true, right? Being able to prevent problems before they ever occur, so that someone who is going to make a change, like a DBA that needs to make a change to a table or a stored procedure, can then look downstream and see all the different systems, right? The data might lead from some stored procedure upstream to the Power BI reports that you have coming off Azure, but maybe some of the other data goes over to a different reporting system or Excel spreadsheets that people are using. And being able to be aware of that, either to maybe not make the change because it's going to be too dramatic, or to at least be able to notify the people downstream, becomes an important part of change management and in the whole data ops discipline in general.
Yeah, agreed. It's a super important topic, something that some companies are like addressing today, sometimes in a more manual fashion, but so we can see that the whole concept of data ops and change impact around data sort of really taking on a life of its own, but largely mimicking also a lot of the DevOps that we've seen and the tools that have come from DevOps in the past, and the processes and methodologies around that. So I see tools like Manta playing a really important part in those processes and methodologies to gain efficiencies, at least from getting that information around changes, upstream changes, and how it might impact your downstream assets in a very quick fashion, so that decisions can be made around sort of whether there needs to be an update to the asset itself. And I think we can jump over this next slide because it's going to give us an opportunity to dig into that a little bit more. How do organizations benefit from data lineage? I think it's sort of clear to say, off of what we were just talking about, that understanding the source, and then understanding ultimately all of the ways that the data has moved through the data pipeline, all the way to that consuming application, or to the outputs of a machine learning model, is going to be more and more important. And it can really just come down to a trust factor. It's there's a lot of talk today around algorithm bias, right, and about the concerns that these ML models may have algorithms that are sort of biased or leaning towards a specific area or topic. Now, I get that is an incredibly important sort of area to put some focus, but I think what overshadows that in some way is, let's just sort of go down to brass tacks and think about the data that is feeding those machine learning models, and let's think about the data that is feeding those strategic executive dashboards that are ultimately providing KPIs, the insights to how your company is growing, how to the health of your company, and that can ultimately be feeding externally to various agencies or institutes that need insights around your company to make decisions in terms of investments, and to make decisions in terms of strategic acquisitions and that type of thing. Now, those are a lot of insights, super important insights that ultimately lead to actions that are in the tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, and they are fed by data, and there still continues today to be this blind trust around the data, and the feeling that hey, if it's come through our sort of our tight controls, our centralized tight controls, then I think we're safe. But as Ernie and I were just alluding to, this evolution and this change where we're now getting to a point where a lot of things are self-service, and there is the ability to then just build out pipeline after pipeline, whether it's something small and it's not, it's not shared, but then ultimately it could be shared out, to some central location where others are gaining access to it. And gaining access to those insights, again, blind trust. How do we ensure that we can get some, visibility to that data and its journey all the way to that consuming application, or to the outputs of a machine learning model? And there is this really, I would say, a partnership between your data lineage tools and your catalogs that can then start to sort of drive out information like this, and give an opportunity for someone who's not not only just non-technical, but sort of even those senior leaders or executives who are coming to the boardroom with insights from key dashboards, that they could very simply jump into an intuitive catalog, look up that dashboard, and then just check upstream, hey, where's this data coming from? And, sort of at what points along the way is it being transformed? And I just want to make sure that, my data quality team is on top of it, and that my governance team has certified or endorsed that data at every step. And if that executive can glean all that information thanks to Manta and a combination of the catalog UI within a matter of seconds or minutes, that there is going to be an opportunity for every individual who is taking action on core insights. Give them the opportunity to feel comfortable with making those big decisions, particularly when we're talking about large dollars.
Yeah, you have a point there talking about data quality and data sensitivity, which you brought up the value of governance solutions alongside of Manta, and whether it's looking at terminology or pointing to various stewards, the data quality piece becomes important, because then we can illustrate these concepts in the context of lineage. We talked earlier about how do I trace the path that data took from one particular privacy location to another. And that's certainly something that Lineage can show. But we believe at Manta in this idea of having tags that are identified by users or by other software solutions that they have, particularly for data quality. So that data quality can be measured, again, within the context of Lineage, because data quality problems happen. But if we see that there's a data quality issue that's happening on a pipeline that leads to a revenue report that's read by our VP of sales, and it also leads to an employee report that helps measure parking passes for the parking lot in our corporate location. Well, we can always be the judge of that, at which thing is more important. But, chances are the data quality issue that's on the revenue report is going to have a whole lot more priority that I need to fix it. And that's an obvious example, of course. But being able to see these things like yellow stickies that you put onto a Lineage report that's painted all the way across your wall. You can see I've got a little bit of mural here behind me. Imagine if that was a Lineage picture and, I've got big yellow stickies, on all the parts where it's really crucial. Highlight that for the users so they can see it on a regular basis on, however frequently we check data quality and measure not only the priorities of one versus another, but also be able to watch the trends over time and how data quality has gone astray within that lineage or has improved.
Yeah, this is this is certainly then where we get into the hot topic and into that data observability segment that sort of is growing in popularity. Sometimes, or actually probably even oftentimes, poor quality data is obvious. Duplicates. You imagine in order to cash processes and accounts receivable and sending out invoices that embarrassingly are sent to the wrong location, or you're sort of just ultimately not dealing with your master data in the right way, or just not paying enough close attention to the quality of that master data, can lead to sort of a number of scenarios where you've got accounts receivable tearing their hair out. But then you have these other concerns where it's the stuff that you can't see, the stuff that you can't immediately detect from just simple human views or monitoring, that like at least from the end of a data pipeline, to see the outputs and to say definitively, well, I can see a problem here. And it's those kinds of gotchas, right? It's the somebody, a DBA made a change, sort of deprecated a table or made some kind of update to that system without warning, whether through some automated fashion, or just essentially manually letting every downstream stakeholder know that there was a change made to that specific database. That's when things happen. That's when we have these important assets at the very end that are impacted, but ultimately no one knows about it. So then we get into the idea of automated data lineage. Now, just to sort of take this back a little bit, and Ernie, I'm sure you can probably explain the world before automated data lineage, or just kind of sort of how companies ultimately handled data lineage, if at all, back to sort of in the days when they had to track
People
it.
Still do. I mean, everybody does lineage, and automating it is certainly going to accelerate the process, but everybody does it because there's always some executive somewhere that has a report they don't understand. What do? They pick up the phone, they do an email, they get in Slack, they try to track down whoever is that wrote the report or knows the report. And if that person's not there available, not there or available, or it's their colleague that had to write it, before you know it, it's worse than the telephone game that we all played when we were in grammar school. You have to chain these things together with a complex organization to try and get to the actual rules, the source, the timing, etc. And it's got fits and starts. So being able to get this in an automated fashion not only things up, but it improves accuracy, right? So you're not just having hearsay of someone that thinks how it was written or what was done, or the need to carve up code in an incredibly intensive manual scenario that takes weeks. We talked to banks that have needed months and months with a lot of extra bodies in order to come up with accurate lineage reports. So looking at the code itself gives me the truth, right? It's really showing how did this actually flow? What does the calculation actually look like when it surfaced? And that's important. Here at Manta, we like to say we crunch the code, right? It's because we look at code, we're not looking at the data, but we're examining that code up close and parsing it such that we understand, based on whether it's SQL or an ETL tool or, the idiosyncrasies of a reporting tool, we actually know how it flows from one place into another. And those are the relationships that we put into an underlying graph database to then illustrate in this fashion. And there's more that we do with it, right? Visualization is not just one, the only aspect, right? We pour through that lineage metadata to do automated discovery on patterns that you have within that metadata. But certainly the ability to just look at it visually is important. You can see a screenshot there, which shows the extreme color coding we can talk about. But being able to understand where you are when you're looking at that lineage. So we document it and then can display it. That visual map is important not only in its own right, but also to be enabled so that the lineage can be pushed into other solutions that people have invested in. And that's what that's really about when we talk about making it available to third-party applications.
That's a good point. Actually, something just to, elaborate on is the idea of integration with other platforms. Manta is solely a best-in-class lineage tool, as in Manta specializes in data lineage. Manta doesn't try to be a data catalog or doesn't try to be an ETL tool or build out, sort of like a broader platform here. Your focus is solely on data lineage and doing data lineage well. And then, in the cases where these interactive maps, these visualizations, these data ops type, notifications or information, any added annotations like active tags that are applied on the Manta platform can then through REST APIs be then shared with other platforms to provide then further visibility to not just the lineage, but then sort of with focuses around sort of other parts or portions of that data journey. And I think that's this is really what drove me towards Manta in the first place, and so why Manta is so strategic in a partnership with Data Meaning and to our clients is the fact that Manta has that specialized view. Engineers are really just focused solely on building out these scanners for the sole purpose of bringing back as much information as humanly possible around data lineage in any organization's data pipeline. And Ernie, you mentioned sort of like as you were talking about kind of the days before and how companies had to essentially either sort of jump on the phone or tap shoulders to find or to investigate a data pipeline to see if they could get more information around sort of upstream sources. There have been plenty of attempts as well, as I know that there's still templates that are floated out there of individuals who are tasked with actually entering information, like sort of what upstream systems might be then feeding another system, so on and so forth, at least around their key data elements and strategic analytic assets, so that they have some kind of inventory of of those data pipelines that they deem to be important. So you can imagine the sheer inefficiency of that is you do that one time, and I can imagine that there would be a massive undertaking, just depending on sort of how many pipelines you're trying to bring visibility to. But then on top of that is just how do you sustain that? So it's scalability and sustainability. I think that those are probably the sort of the two key areas and two key elements around automated data lineage using a platform like Manta that makes it sort of so important to as you have seen with these business drivers, as you start to invest or embark on these journeys of drawing out and getting visualizations to and transparency to your data pipelines, it's important to really explore and understand the value, the business value of having automated data lineage and the efficiencies that are driven from it.
Absolutely.
Jumping over to really our last slide. This gets into Manta, beyond just how does Manta derive and present lineage, but then some of the really sort of some of the key differentiations of like Manta's technology and where Manta is taking things in terms of enhancements, and sort of again sort of one of those core reasons why we've gone with Manta is that not only are they specialized and focused in more efficiently deriving lineage at scale for very large enterprises, but then when we get into concepts of change impact and data ops, Manta's thinking about sort of what happens when the visualization is there. What kind of business use cases are Manta seeing that would warrant additional enhancements to those visualizations to be able to provide again levels of push notification or enhanced views of your data over time. So I'll let Ernie speak to some of these elements as well.
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about some of these. So first of all, we like to say at Manta that we're able to show you the things that you're not normally able to see, right? And one of these things that can come back and grab you in the back of the neck is something we refer to as indirect lineage. Indirect lineage can have lots of different meanings depending on the technology that we're scanning. But a real easy one to understand is SQL. And you could say that I want to I'm migrating with a insert statement, insert name, address, phone, and it's as a select statement where you're saying select name, address, phone from table A, and you ultimately want to put it into table X, but you have a where clause that says where the state code equals New Jersey. Well, I'm moving name, address, phone. I'm not moving state code. So state code's not really in the lineage, but wow, it impacts the lineage, because if you have a where clause, it's going to affect the number of rows that move downstream. So that's very important. We actually illustrate that with a different color, a separate appearing line. And, where clauses are just one example. There's joins, ETL tools have intermediate temporary and staging variables that can affect lineage. So we identify those things in our architecture. We believe strongly in making lineage easy to consume, right? You can't look at a giant plate of spaghetti and a tangled mess and not understand what it is if it's all the same color and it all looks exactly the same. It's just too difficult. So being able to tease that apart, apply color coding into the different sections by technology or to the particular element that you're looking at, being able to do detailed filtering is critical. Customers utilize Manta because our architecture provides time slicing. You do your lineage at the, tomorrow is the last day of March. You got your lineage recorded. Well, maybe at some point someone says, well, wait a minute. We have to see exactly what we did for our financial reports at the end of the year. I need to look at December's lineage, or maybe I need to look at the end of Q3 of 2021 in September. And if you recorded the lineage, you can simply go right back to that date and look at the lineage and what it was for that report on that particular time, but also be able to compare it. So what changed? What's different, right? This report's not the same as it was for the results in December. Why? What could have changed? What calculations? Maybe we went to a different source or target. That's critical to be able to look at and do it easily. We talk about transformation details. We're parsing the code. This is not just simple, primitive, look at the log and record the lineage of what was written and what was read. That's very important too. We call it operational lineage, but code-based lineage surfaces the actual business rules that were implemented, how they were changed, and parsing through the details of those rules so that if a particular calculation uses 10 columns coming from the upstream somewhere, we're going to identify that and let you see it. And finally, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, something we call active tags, being able to let you accent the lineage where necessary. Some of this we do automatically. We recognize what we call transforming columns. It's very common in ETL, right? You might have dozens and dozens of columns that are simply moved from one place to another, right? We migrated the state code from this Oracle table to that, SQL Server table, and it never got touched, it never was changed. So we flag specifically things that really are a major calculation so you can see it quickly, and we tag it with a different color icon. But you can accent those things as well. So if you're pulling in data that you're aware of from data quality analytics or just what you are aware of yourself, you can put those tags into the lineage and be able to do the kinds of things, like I said, with the parking pass or a revenue report, as I had mentioned earlier, and really have that show up as a bright sticky note. You see a little screenshot there, right? So I was using yellow sticky notes, but you can choose whatever color that you like.
They're all great enhancements. I think the active tags is really going to take on, and this again, it's like I've said it multiple times, but Manta is really coming under that headline of data observability across your data pipeline and your ability to not just view that big picture view of your singular data pipeline, but then start to drill down into each of the objects, whether they be table or so whether they're at the system level or at the table level or the column level, and get some clarity around important categories, right? Data classification, data categorization, and whether that's for purposes of sensitivity or whether that's for a simple data quality score, or whether that's for a specific data domain or even a project. There's opportunities to then apply these tags to get visibility to sort of how these data elements are sort of perhaps categorized and how relevant they are to your company and your role. Sure. And for getting that level of transparency. Now, as you can imagine too, taking active tags, applying the REST APIs and the integration abilities of Manta to extend into these other platforms, understanding ownership. So whether that's a data steward or a subject matter expert or somebody who owns a specific analytic asset, now we're starting to sort of piece together sort of what it means to be transparent and closely monitoring and having that data observability across all of your data pipelines. And sort of clearly it's not scalable in, sort of in today's ecosystem just to do that manually, but having a way of being able to sort of track, very dynamically over time, that you can now start to monitor specific data pipelines. You're getting your data quality scores, you're showing that visibility in your tags, and then perhaps you've got certain thresholds around your data quality scores. And if they don't meet a certain threshold, then with the REST APIs and other platforms, there can be this concept of pushing that notification out to the owners of those assets. Hey, you've got that metadata sitting out there in the data catalog. Push that information out to the owner of that asset. Say, hey, Manta has discovered that there is a change to X pipeline and X system. We need you to know about that.
So do you want to see if anybody's got any questions? Please go ahead and put them in the chat, and we're happy to answer them here. But I know we're getting close on time.
A couple of minutes left here, yeah. And Ernie, you have visibility to the to the questions. I've with my share of the slides. I'm not getting.
Yeah, I can see. No problem. But certainly encourage everyone to go to the data meeting website, and I don't know if it's in the chat, but head there, come out to Manta. Please visit, and any questions that you have, I'd be happy to continue to follow up on. It's a very critical discussion.
Absolutely. And, Ernie and I are happy to accept follow-ups from, individuals who are interested in either further exploring, the Manta platform, but then also, sort of based on any of these drivers and use cases, how I think hopefully we've sort of helped you further understand or sort of, highlighted what those common business drivers are. I can't stress enough, actually, in just the last few weeks, how many conversations I've had around self-service analytics and around the governance of and data ups around self-service analytics. And so it's the extent that you can utilize a platform, a tool that can highlight just ultimately all of those pipelines and where that full inventory of your data sources and the inventory of the consuming applications wherever they might live in your organization can be hugely beneficial. All right, I think we're right up on the top of the hour there. So Ernie, I want to thank you for jumping in and riffing on data lineage. Like I said, it's a pretty hot topic. I'm sure we'll have many more conversations around this in future webinars, but for now, I think we could probably sign off.
All right. Thank you, James. Thanks, everyone.